When did a gut feeling save your life? This was a few years back. I came out of a club in my hometown after a heavy night of drinking. I was a student then, and out with a lot of university friends that I lost during the night. I was alone. I was going to get a taxi home, but thought I could do with some McDonald's first. We have a big 24 hours one in our town. During my drunken walk towards the McDonald's, I heard crying coming from one of the dark narrow alleyways we have in our town. I followed the noise down the alleyway until I came across a woman with her face towards the wall. She had a hood covering her face and had no distinguishing features. At first glance I thought that maybe she'd been assaulted or mugged. Like, why else would there be a woman crying in an alleyway? Anyway, as I got closer to her in that poorly lit alleyway, I saw two giant industrial bins between her and myself. It wasn't until I got within a few feet of the bins that I stopped. It was like a giant shock went through my body. I don't know how to adequately explain it other than a primal instinct. Within 2 seconds of seeing bins that are large enough for people to hide behind, the dark lighting of the alleyway, and the faceless woman crying, I was 50% sure I was prey. I felt an urge to run away. It was like something inhuman in me was telling me to turn and run my effing legs out of that dark place. When I got to the light at the end of the alleyway, I turned to see if anybody was chasing me. Nobody was. But nobody was crying also. That gave me legit chills. It was Christmas Day. I'm driving to my parents' at 6 a.m. It's extremely dark out, when I see a horrible accident in front of me taking up the two right lanes. Both vehicles don't have their hazard lights on. I pull in front of them, switch my hazard lights on, and get out of my car on the freeway, hoping I can help them and make sure they're okay. I'm walking toward the first driver, 18/19, who has blood all over him. He asks me to help him talk to 911 because he spoke broken English. Then I go to the second driver in his 60s and see if he's okay, who just blames me for the accident. I just responded I didn't do it. The operator then tells me to get everyone on the side of the freeway, which is only 2 to 3 feet from the slowest lane. Suddenly I have this gut feeling to look to my left, and as I do, I see a SUV racing toward us, and I suddenly realize he's not going to stop and he's about to hit the first vehicle. The rest happened within a few seconds. The only thing I can think of is get out of the way, and the only way was to go backwards. At the time I didn't know, but there was an overpass behind us. As I'm about to fully fall back, I bothered to look where I was falling and saw how far the drop was. I reasoned I was either going to get hit by the SUV or be crippled from the fall and get hit by a car below me. Fat note from my part. I hurled myself back up, and as I'm doing so, I watched the SUV hit my leg. The only thing I'm thinking is relax, relax, relax. I came out with no injuries and the young man wasn't hit. Unfortunately, the older man next to me was hit and killed on impact. After hitting the man, the guy in the SUV, 65 plus, hit my car and then swerved through all 5 lanes of traffic and crashed into the center divider. He stayed in his car for a while, and when he tried to get out, he was frantic and tried to cross all 5 lanes while cars were going by. I screamed and told him please not to cross. The guy that was hit was knocked like 100 feet from where we were standing, past where my car was parked. His shoes, socks, money, everything was scattered across the freeway. The worst part of witnessing it was the skid marks of his blood on the freeway, and his insides was in one little pile. All this was happening while I was still on the phone with 911. The operator asked me what happened, and asked me if I could drag his body off the freeway. I couldn't do it. I was afraid someone else might not see the accident, hit my car, and then me. It's been over a year since the accident and the police report isn't out yet. The guy in the SUV has insurance and a lawyer though. After the accident, a CHP told me that he's seen accidents like this where the Good Samaritan was killed trying to help. Take away from this: do not get out of your vehicle on the freeway. When I was in college, I lived in a sketchy part of Chicago, Humboldt Park, Logan Square before gentrification. I liked to take late-night strolls. Even when I was living in that neighborhood as a 20-year-old woman. Yeah. I know. Pretty dumb of me. One night, I was feeling stressed out, so I embarked on one of my late-night strolls. I was walking along a somewhat busy road. Cars were zooming past me. Pretty normal. I wasn't paying much attention because I was too wrapped up in whatever was stressing me out that night. Suddenly, a chill shot up my spine. Hypervigilance washed over me and I became more alert than I had ever been. Something was wrong. Someone was watching me. I quickly spotted a car. It was driving in the opposite direction. A little slower than usual. It was too dark for me to see anyone inside the car. And the car was pretty unassuming. But I still knew something was off. They were watching me. I just knew. The car drove past me and then made a U-turn. Now it was right behind me. Creeping along the curb. Luckily, there was a Walgreens a few blocks ahead. I started walking faster. And the car eventually sped past me and disappeared into a corner. I somehow knew I wasn't safe yet. So I still sprinted to Walgreens. I told the security guard what happened. And we both went outside. The car was parked up the street. About 50 to 100 feet away. The security guard was a big guy who looked intimidating. He marched toward the car. And the car immediately backed up. Made a U-turn. And then booked it out of there. The security guard called the cops. And they drove me home. I never took a late night stroll again. My gut made me more alert. But it was really the security guard who saved my life. I'm positive that if he wasn't there that night, something bad would have happened to me. I wish I could find that security guard to thank him. I was a young, naive freshman in college and had basically no experience talking to boys. This guy had sat next to me for my whole 2-hour psych lecture and casually talked to me the whole time. Just little comments about the lecture. Showing me things on his laptop. Innocent stuff. When lecture ended and we got outside, it was pouring. Like. To this day I've seen rain like that maybe twice in my life. Rain that would physically hurt to walk in. He offered me a ride and I said yes. But as he was pulling the car up, I thought to myself, don't get in, and took off running to my dorm. Saw him on the news a few months later for assaulting 2 women. I was working as a bank teller and our bank had large windows on 2 sides of the building so you could watch everyone walk from their car into the bank. A guy started walking in and I instantly knew something was up. He wasn't doing anything abnormal. I just got a weird feeling. I was the only one in the front. Everyone else was either at lunch or in the vault. So I couldn't leave my station. I prepared myself to get robbed, so I took a few deep breaths and tried to remember everything about him to tell the cops about it later. Sure enough. He walked up and opened his wallet to show me a note that said something like, I have a gun. Do not say a word. Give me all the money you have. That gut feeling allowed me enough time to calm down and formulate my thoughts so I could get him out of there as soon as possible while also remembering as much about his appearance, voice, mannerisms, etc. as I could. I don't know if it was a gut feeling so much as good timing, but as a kid me and my brother shared bunk beds. I had the bottom bunk. Every night I would get up to get myself a drink and go back to bed. I was maybe 6 when one night I get up to get my juice and I barely had stepped out of our bedroom when there was a loud cracking sound. This woke my parents and the 3 of us rushed back to find that the wood supporting the top bunk mattress had split and was now stabbing jaggedly into my mattress and pillow. A few seconds earlier or a minute later I would have been asleep there. Also, my brother didn't wake up the whole time, despite his bed giving out under him and dropping him several feet. Relaying a friend's story, he was living in London and about to catch his usual bus when he felt like a cigarette. Just as he lit up, he could see his bus pull around the bend. He considered throwing out his ciggy but thought, bugger it. I really want my smoke. Next bus was 6 minutes away. So he didn't board his bus and watched it drive a bit down the road when suddenly he was knocked to the ground by a powerful unseen force. His bus was the victim of a terrorist bombing and exploded just after the stop. Almost 8 months pregnant. Normal. Complication-free pregnancy. Walking through the grocery store I had a twinge of a headache. Told my husband we needed to go home. At home I took a shower and relaxed a bit. But got an urgent, impending doom feeling. Still just a tiny headache. Not even enough for a Tylenol. Packed my toddler's diaper bag and requested we go to urgent care. The whole ride there I felt fine. Wondering what I was even going to tell them at check-in. But that "you're not okay" feeling was still looming. We pulled in. I carried my sleeping 2-year-old inside and basically said, "I'm pregnant and something isn't right." My blood pressure was 256/148. I had a seizure 7 minutes after getting in the room. If I had told my husband to drive past and go to the we would have been stuck in traffic. As a truck had rolled over. If I hadn't left the grocery store or my house when I did, there's a chance I wouldn't have made it. We got a ride to the hospital when I was stable. I was induced at 35-ish weeks. And my son was born perfectly fine. Albeit small. I stayed on blood pressure meds for 8 days before it went back to normal. I was on my way to work once and as the light turned green and I was about to go through, felt something tell me to wait, so I slowed a bit and as did a car zoomed through the red light of that intersection. I'm sure if I just went through I would have been hit. On my very first day as a full-fledged police officer, I was called to assist on a single car accident. It had been raining that day and a car had crashed and turned sideways on a highway off-ramp, forcing the first officer to shut it down. He was afraid that cars were coming by too fast, and he asked me to shut down the closest lane. I parked my car in a lane on what was a perfectly straight stretch of highway. Eventually, fire and EMS arrived to tend to the people who had been in the car, and a tow truck arrived to clear the wreck. There were 5 vehicles with flashing lights on this straight stretch of highway at night. I was also wearing a full-length high-visibility raincoat with reflectors on it. I felt pretty comfortable standing near the center lane and so I wasn't paying attention to oncoming traffic. But I suddenly got the feeling that I should stand closer to my unit. As soon as I moved, a car barely avoided striking my police car. Veered to where I had been standing. Crossed over 2 lanes. Struck a car. Veered in the opposite direction. Struck another car. Spun out. And then came to a stop after striking a guardrail. I ran down the highway to assist the driver, who had totaled her car and had broken both her legs. She said that she couldn't tell which lane was being blocked off. I'm almost 100% sure that she had been texting and driving. 3 years ago I was planning a major fundraising event. I was working ridiculous hours trying to make sure everything was going to run smoothly. I had worst-case scenarios planned out like a crazy person. One day I was climbing the stairs after getting home rather late when I became unnaturally short of breath. As I sat on my bed, my breathing returned to normal. My face became hot with what I can only assume is what's considered a hot flash in older women. I started to tingle with fear. I don't know how to explain it exactly. It was like I could feel electricity in the air warning me something was wrong. I immediately packed my laptop, paperwork, extra clothing, toothbrush, and so on, and I slowly walked down the stairs to my car, driving myself to the As soon as I got through the doors I collapsed, unable to breathe. I don't recall everything that happened right after. But what I do recall was being in the hospital for 8 days because both of my lungs were littered with blood clots. I had gotten a blood clot in my lower left calf from sitting working too many hours on the event. It broke loose and spread throughout my lungs. The doctor said it looked like my lungs were filled with popcorn. Had I not driven myself to the hospital when I did, the nurse said I would have died. I will never ignore shortness of breath again. And I will trust myself when I know something is wrong.